How did I do on Wasted?
The branding of Wasted, it's really interesting because I have never thought about an individual one of my books like that. And I didn't, and I know this is being recorded and my publishers might see it on YouTube, but I didn't particularly like the cover. But I did like it a lot better than the original, the first draft of the cover, which was exactly the same as it is, except not red. So it's interesting that you picked out the redness as being the thing that, for rather kind of obvious reasons, when you think about it, inspires the idea of danger and edginess. The colour that they originally had was a kind of greeny, yellowy, sicky, greeny, yellowy, and that really wasn't going to work at all. But I feel that the cover doesn't say enough. So it is interesting that you managed to take so many things.
What would you have liked it to be like?
Well, I would want it to do all the things you said it did, and I'm not very good, which is why I'm a writer, not a designer, at thinking of what the cover should be like. Although I did have to think about it with Mondays Are Red, because I was commissioning the cover design, and that is also a red cover. So I had to think about those things that you were asking about. The cover designer asked me to think about really words that I associated with it. So not as detailed as your branding wheel, which I think is a really good idea. Thanks. So do you want to hold that one?
Yeah. Not a million miles.
No,
actually.
exactly. So red, obviously, but then that's the title is Mondays Are Red, but also sinister, nasty. If you look closely, which you can't from here, there's a face behind it with eyes looking out from a kind of red fire. So what I had to do in order to get that cover commissioned was to list all the words and things that I could think of about the book, the words that were important. So I put in fire and danger and sinister and nasty, because it is a very dark, edgy book. And I think the guy came up with a very
Do you know what
good
that doesn't say to me, though? Because in Wasted, there is quite a lot of drink and drugs. This doesn't say drink and drugs to me. Am I right?
Yes, you're right. Yeah,
okay.
It is appropriate for a slightly younger
age group.
But I have a difficulty, and those of you who want to be children's writers may find the same thing. A difficulty with branding myself as a children's writer, because if you're a children's writer, you very often write lots and lots of different things. I mean, I've written Thomas the Tank Engine books and non-fiction about the teenage brain and nasty dark stuff like Wasted and Flesh Market and Mondays Are Red. So I don't know how I'm to brand myself in that case. So I think what I've done, just listening to what you were saying, I think what I've done is subconsciously brand myself as me and what I think I would like to project of me, and I don't know what people would say when I go out of the room, but is somebody who, when I do an event in schools, for example, I'm going to do it professionally. I'm going to deliver what I think the people, that the audience wants to hear. I'm going to do all the setup of it professionally. I'm going to be professional, and I'm going to be as intelligent as I can. And my drive is to bring stories to children and make them interested in reading. So that's what I'm going to deliver for them in the talk. And I think that's You're
one of the most organized. I remember about a year, was it last year or the year before, we were at the Edinburgh Book Festival, and Nikki was doing a talk, and she brought out this numbered file with all her talks in it, with different talks under different numbers. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so organised, how fabulous. I'm not organised like that really at all.
I'd forgotten that.
And I feel quite, I felt quite envious. That is, you're obviously doing that professional thing. You're obviously projecting that perfectly well.
I think on the other hand, though, I have to do that, otherwise I'll forget, because I'm very scatty in my head. I somehow have an image of being very organised, but I'm very, very scatty in my head indeed. I wanted to ask you, because you and we do some different things in terms of social media and stuff. There are some things that we both do, and there are some things that you do that I don't do, and vice versa. And I don't know about you, but I have no training in this stuff. I've got absolutely no training in marketing or any of this stuff. And I'm completely unstrategic, and I wondered, when you were making your decisions as to what bits you were going to do, whether you were going to blog or not blog, Facebook or not Facebook, how did you make those decisions? Have you been quite strategic about it, or has it been more of a learning process and more organic?
A bit of both, really, with Twitter. I mean, I was told at HarperCollins, you should be on Twitter. And this was just at the point where Twitter was starting. And they said, you've got to go on Twitter. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And it's kind of grown and grown and grown, and I find I'm good at it, and it's a great way for me to communicate with all different kinds of people, not only readers but librarians and people in research institutions, because of the historical nature of what I write mostly. There's a lot of research to be done, so I want to sort of have good links into those sort of communities and find out what's inside archives. And Twitter's great for sharing information, sharing links. So it really worked on lots of different levels for me. So the minute I got in there, I thought, oh, this is actually brilliant. I quite enjoy this. It's quite exciting. And really liked it. That said, the blog decision was quite a strategic decision, because
this is not to blog, because you don't have your own blog.
I don't blog, or I do, but I blog for other people. And I think very early on I realised that the amount of people who were going to be interested in my children's books, my mystery series, all my different kinds, that was a big market to cover all on my own. And other people already had sections of that market. So if I could go in and blog, for example, this week, because Brighton Bell's out, I've been doing quite a bit of blogging, and I blogged on a very large history blog called History in an Hour, which is run by a guy called Rupert Colley. And I can sort of sell, if you like, the historical aspect of what I do on his blog, and he has a pre-made market of thousands of people who subscribe to his blog. So for me, that was a really kind of easy way to just take that market. If I wanted to have it, it was kind of there, and they were quite happy to give me 800 words because they had space to fill, and I could fill them with something that was reasonably interesting. And so rather than curate something myself, which had to cover all these different things, I thought it was a better idea for me to sort of tap into these different markets that other people already had. And that was certainly a strategic sort of decision. But the Twitter thing wasn't. And now I'm on Facebook, which I was told to do by Polygon, who are the publishers of the Mirabelle Bevan series. And that's been really interesting as well, because I didn't expect to really like Facebook. But we were talking about this earlier, and I've started using Facebook as like a mini blog. And I talk about lots of things on my writing life. I might talk about an event I've done, or something that's occurred to me, or a question someone's asked, or something I've realised I'm doing right, or something I've realised I'm doing wrong. And I just talk about me as a writer on there. And that's actually been quite interesting, because you get different people coming back and giving you comments that probably they wouldn't be able to give you on Twitter, because Twitter is very succinct. So
the whole thing for me with social networking started with my blog on how to get published, so Help I Need a Publisher. And it was completely unstrategic. I had no idea what I was doing or particularly why, except that I'd been to an event and certain things had happened in the event that had made me crab it. And I woke up, it was a couple of mornings later, I woke up really early and I was still cross about it. I woke up early, woke up at 6 o'clock, fumed to myself, then got up, 7 o'clock, went to my desk and started a blog. And just so I blogged in anger. I started it in a fit of crabbedness, and never intended the crab it or bat thing to stick, but it became my brand. And I think, again, thinking about what you were saying, because I haven't thought about it consciously before, really, that's where I think my brand, if I have a brand, is now. It's the Crabbit Old Bat. So I'm supposed to be crabbit and grumpy and extra uber honest, and I wear boots and shoes that I think are quite nice, and people can recognise me by them. So that's become the thing. And I realised quite recently that this has been extraordinarily successful, because my husband said to me that I should go out and buy some more boots, because I have to think of my brand.
What a fabulous opportunity!
Which I thought was pretty amazing. But it was accidental. It was it's honest, because as you said, you can't do any of this stuff if it isn't really you. It has to be part of you. But you have to select the bits that are going to be worth promoting, going to be interesting to people. So it wasn't strategic, it was accidental, but I can see that it's worked really well. And
I think once you've got a start like that as well, you can sort of get into something by mistake and find it's working for you. And then once you understand how it's working, you can then become more strategic with it and say, well, that bit of it's working, but that bit of it isn't, or maybe I should play up this, or maybe I shouldn't play up that. And I think you've become less crabbit, because I do occasionally read your blog and you're a bit more cheery than you used to be. I think
I must go back home and be more crabbit. Now, did you have all of this platform before you decided to ebook one of your books?
Yes, I had Twitter. And I have a website, but my website really is an archive site.
I'm going to be showing them your website.
Okay, well, we won't talk about my website. But yeah, I had the website and I had Twitter. And then with the rise of ebooks, it was actually my husband I call him the greatest geek. He's the world's biggest geek. And he said, oh, you should definitely make your books into ebooks. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And it was relatively early on, really, and it worked almost immediately. And what was interesting is the book that was in print that sold least was a book called Ma Polinsky's Pockets, which is the story of a girl who inherits £8 million from an old lady that she's hardly ever met when she was a kid. And she goes off to try and find out why she's been left this money. Ma Polinsky's Pockets sold really badly when Random House had it out, but it's our bestseller on Kindle. And that's really interesting to see that, because it wasn't my expectation. I thought everyone would want to buy Truth or Dare, which was the big top seller, but it certainly isn't the case. So, so I had some of it, and then other bits of it I've had to say, well, I'll see how that works. And it's very much a kind of see how it feels for a while and see if it's working. And if it's working, I'll keep doing it. If it's not working, I won't. Because I think, being a writer, it isn't like being an accountant, and it isn't like being a solicitor. There isn't a set career path. People go to these how to get published events, and I find them really difficult because there is no one way to get published. If you take the 900 writers that are coming out of the yurt backstage at the Edinburgh Book Festival, and you did a quick interview with all of them to find out how they got published and how they decided what they were going to write, and what their career was like, you would get 900 different answers. So there is no one way. I can't say to you, you've got to go on Facebook. You've all got to go on Facebook. Some of you will suit Facebook and some of you won't, and it will work for some of you and it won't work for others. So I think there's that real sense of it's quite an individual sort of a career that you have to have as a writer, and you just have to go with it. Try it for a bit, see how it works for you, and adopt the stuff that works and don't adopt the stuff that doesn't.
I think that that's the great thing about e-publishing, is that you have the control yourself, and you can make decisions. If something isn't going well, if a book isn't selling very well, you can do something about it. Whereas if your book, and this is not me saying by any means you should self-publish and you shouldn't go for publication. I mean, I'm also wanting to be published by publishers. This is not an either-or situation. But when and if you do self-publish something, if, as I say, it's not selling particularly well, you can then a month later or 6 weeks later or 6 months later decide to do something to promote it. Whereas if it's been published in the traditional way, then what generally happens, what almost always happens, is that the publisher will spend a little bit of time at the very beginning, around publication, doing as much of a push as they can. And then, for obvious reasons, and this isn't a criticism, they have to take their eye off that book and they have to concentrate on the other books by other writers that are coming out over the next months. And so they won't really ever, or almost ever, do something later to promote a book that you have had published, unless something kind of topical comes up in the news and they have got the will and inclination to do that. But with self-publishing, you can take it forward whenever you want. So, for example, Mondays Are Read, the one that I brought out as an ebook, it was published first 10 years ago. I mean, I admit it's not selling in very impressive figures, but I don't mind about that at all, because what I'm going to do is probably early next year, when I've perhaps got a bit more time, I'm going to organise a creative writing competition that's going to go around schools, and that'll give it a push. And I can decide when to do that. So it's a complete control thing. Or I could do a big push on Facebook or whatever with the e-publishing. How
do you decide what you're going to e-publish? What makes you think, oh, that's an e-book?
Books for children and teenagers are not usually things that are going to work very well at the moment. That may change. It may even change in the next few months. Some teenagers, keen readers, are buying Kindles, or actually more often, bizarrely, reading on their phones, but not really enough to make a big difference. So I would only bring out a teenage or children's book if it had already been published, so it already had the review coverage, the kind of substantial, say, national newspaper review coverage. But the other books that I have brought out from scratch have been niche non-fiction books for aspiring writers, mainly. So the Write a Great Synopsis, and the next one that comes out is Dear Agent, about the covering letter. So they're short non-fiction. I know where the market is. My blog is about that stuff, so it's my blog readers and then Twitter followers who are the market. So I would always choose to publish something like that myself, because I will do it as well or better than a publisher and keep 70% of the cover price instead of, say, 3 or 4 or 5% if it was with a normal publisher. So if I know I can sell it, I know where it's going to, and I know exactly how I want it to be, and I can outsource proofreading and cover design and formatting as I do, then it makes real sense to do it myself. And the other one is the book on how to use Twitter, TweetRight, The Sensible Person's Guide to Twitter. Again, no need to go through a publisher for that. And also they're shorter than a normal book that a publisher would want to take. I mean, a really kind of basic thing, a publisher, if they're going to publish a book in printed form, the traditional way, it needs to be a certain length. It needs to be chunky enough, purely from a cost base thing. You know, the unit cost is not going to work if you're only going to be able to sell it for £3 or £4. So they're not big enough to be published books. Put them together and they might be. And would you consider putting a new novel out as an ebook?
Yeah, again, I think it's about how niche it is, because most of what I write and where I make most of my money is with my commercial fiction, and that's about mass market, that's about selling quite a lot of copies. And from that point of view, I think probably for things like supermarket deals, for example, are quite important to the kind of books that I generally write, and, you know, the old Waterson's 3 for 2, that kind of thing. So for me, those books are best placed with a publisher, and I don't have stuff that's best placed with me, but it's been really interesting experience putting up my backlist and discovering that these books, which were selling nothing because they were out of print, there's actually still an interest in them, and getting feedback from them, because that's the other lovely thing about social media. People don't realize, as a writer, you know, 10, 15 years ago, you used to get one person who'd come up at the end of an event and 2 quite strange letters usually at your publishing house from people who'd read the book, often saying, you know, what about this one particular sentence? I'm not sure if that's completely right, or I loved your book and I would like to come and live with you, or, you know, strange letters. And that's what you used to get. That was the extent of your involvement with people who were reading your books and people who were selling your books. It all came in sort of very small, quite stilted way. And one of the things that I love about social media is that you get a very immediate feedback from people. So people will be in the middle of reading your book and they will say, I love your book, I'm so enjoying it, I can't wait to read your next one. Or I have a quick question about this particular character. Or can you tell me, you know, some kind of detail that they want to get into. And that's really lovely as a writer to sort of feel, yeah, there are people out there reading my book today and enjoying it today. And it's very reinforcing, I think. You don't feel so isolated. People always talk about writers being isolated. It's a lot of it. You don't have to be so isolated anymore because there's a real kind of open channel of communication. And if you want to communicate with people, you can, and they can communicate with you. And I love, not everyone loves that, not every writer likes that, but I really like that. I like to know that people are reading them and enjoying them, because that's why I write them. So it kind of makes sense.
And most readers nowadays do want to have some kind of contact with the writer. They or even if they don't want to contact them, they want to see something about them. They want to see what they're like as a person. And you might find that sounds very intrusive. I don't think it is, because I think this idea that we're accessible is actually quite an illusion. We're accessible to you now because you can come up and you know, nab us afterwards. But on Twitter and Facebook and those things, if you don't want to respond to somebody's question or overture, you don't have to. You're actually only as accessible as you want to allow yourself to be.
I think I quite often hear writers, some of them are a bit elderly, frankly, and they say things like, oh, it would be so intrusive, and if I started, I would never be able to stop. And I think that's the kind of pub argument, if you like. You know, it's like, well, if you went to the pub, you would be able to just have one gin and tonic and leave, and you would be fine, or beer, or whatever it was you wanted. And you don't have to stay in the pub all day and become a kind of serious, hard-drinking alcoholic just because you can go to the pub. And it's kind of the same about social media. You can go to Twitter and pop in a couple of tweets and then not tweet for the rest of the day, and you only have to tweet what you want to tweet. So it's within your control. Yeah. And I think there is this sense, you've got quite a lot of writers who have preferred that system. Their reason, you know, they've come up with this big reason for why they can't go on is that they would be addicted within seconds. And it's kind of a great way to not communicate with your readers, actually, and not get into it.